Hello and welcome to Man's Model Moments. Today I'm going to bring you the complete 26 hours of the ICM B-26B 148 scale Marauder build I streamed live over the course of a week in just 26 minutes. That means, of course, that I've condensed each hour of the build into 1 minute to show the main activities and steps through the build. Those first steps were to clean up and attach the interior pieces to the fuselage. Here you can see I'm cleaning up and putting in the bomb racks. And the crew positions for the fuselage guns. It was at this point reference to ICM's excellent video instructions proved invaluable in getting the exact fitting of the bomb bay door hinges. I then got cracking with the cockpit, which starts with the construction of the forward tricycle landing gear bay. Next is putting together the excellent pilot seat, and getting that and the centre console onto the main cockpit floor to round out the second hour. The cockpit continued into the next hour with the bomb aimer station and sight. Together with adding some of the wall detail. I then took a break from this and made up the bomb load. This retrospectively turned out to be a mistake as I decided not to use them in the end. Before carrying on, I did a bit of research to check the colours of various aspects of the interior, both in the cockpit and the rear gunner's stations. It was then time for a quick break. After that, I was back into the main bomb bay and checking the fit of all the elements that would come together here. Construction of the rear gunner station was next up, which was a bit fiddly but not difficult. And then I'm cleaning up the twin Browning 50 cal machine guns. And then it was time for a quick review of where I was up to. Then a further internet check on colours for the rear gunner station. Then onto the fuselage turret. Both in the turret itself and the fuselage elements, including the rear crew compartment floor. It was then time for some test fitting of the turret and fuselage to check everything was in order. And at this point everything seemed to be going okay. A little bit more test fitting and I was reasonably happy that the fuselage interior was pretty much ready. To change things up a little, I then moved to the horizontal stabilizers. Along with their associated control surfaces. And then onto the main wing undercarriage bays. Including building up the pieces in the nacelles. All this went together smoothly and test fitting into the wing was a perfect fit. Doing a live stream is always an interactive process, and I went down a bit of a rabbit hole talking about colour at this point, but I always enjoy how these conversations evolve. Distraction aside, I was then back into the opposite wing nacelle gear bay build, which was again a faultless process. After all this interior building, it was finally time to put some paint down, and I started spraying everything interior green. I used Outlaw lacquers here, which I've pretty much switched most of my main painting to, for the reasons I set out in my recent video on them. I'll link that here. Now I'm just coming in with a slightly lightened shade to provide some tonal variation. I went through with another lighter shade after this, as at least 3 shades is really needed for this effect to work well. Here I'm going back and hand painting the detail pieces using ICM acrylics. These are one of the best hand brushing acrylics I've found to date, and they're excellent value too. Onto the cockpit hand painting. First the black items, which I cover with rubber black. then a base coat of light brown for the seat, which will end up yellow. Tamiya XF16 flat aluminium covers the rear door struts. Here's that yellow going over the light brown. And then everything painted so far gets a black-brown oil wash. Once that's dried, I'm going back in with a makeup applicator and removing the excess wash. I'm then continuing the detail painting on the other fuselage half. And here's that wash going over all of the painted interior. While that's drying, I'm spraying all the machine guns and other small items like the control columns black, again using Outlaw lacquer. Time for more wash removal. This nacelle bay shows the process and the effect quite well, I think, which is to create an illusion of depth and shadows where they would naturally be on the real aircraft. It also brings us to halfway through the original challenge build time. In the next hour I put the wings together, which was a completely painless process, with the fit being exemplary throughout this build. The last washed elements then have their excess removed, as in the cockpit here. In some areas I needed to use a brush to remove excess where the applicator couldn't reach, or to feather the effect where it needed it. It was then time to make all the flaps and control surfaces for the aircraft as shown here. And then to test fit both them and the nacelles to highlight any issues, but there weren't any. We could then get back to, yes, you guessed it, removing more excess wash. This is a bit of a grind, but the results are well worth it. Next was a brown oil wash over the yellow seat cushion to bring the vibrancy down a little and create some impression of shadow and depth to them. I then had to go back and spray the rears of the nacelles, which could be visible through the bays, as well as some small items I'd missed still on the sprues. That taken care of, the nacelles could be cemented to the wings. I then did a bit of confirmatory research to check the flap position on parked Marauders, and it was found they don't droop. As such, the flaps were then cemented in their retracted positions, as well as the ailerons. Transparencies in the retractable fuselage gun doors were then cemented carefully in place with extra thin cement. The same was done with the rear gunner windows. Here I put cement in the window positions and then removed the excess so the plastic was tacky but with no excess cement. Tweezers were needed for placement, but this all went according to plan. The gunner's armour panel transparency was next. Here you can see the gun doors are fully functional if desired, and travel on their mountings to any position you'd like, which is fantastic. I just glued them in the shut position in this instance. Now I just want to take a moment to thank all of you who have supported me directly through YouTube memberships and Patreon. This really does keep the channel going, and without you it would be very difficult for me to be able to continue doing this. Now if you're only just seeing your name on here for the first time, it's because I update this monthly, and if I've prepared some videos ahead of time, then there may still have the old list on, even if the list has been updated since then. Don't worry though, your name will get on the list and will continue to appear throughout your support. If you are considering supporting me, YouTube channel membership is by far the easiest way to do this, since Patreon is becoming a more challenging platform to engage with. Whichever you choose, however, I absolutely appreciate your contributions, and don't forget to come and check out the private members Discord, which you get access to at any level. Applying the decal to the instrument panel was fairly straightforward, using some pledge. It's then time to tackle the assembly of the gorgeous Pratt & Whitney R2800 double wasp engines. These are fantastic, and provide the opportunity to open up the cowlings to display all that loveliness and add further detail to them. As a basic out-of-the-box challenge build, however, I'm not going to do that, so it's just a straightforward assembly which will be mostly hidden at the end. The individual exhausts on the cylinders, and the front and rear mounting rings all go on with minimal drama, just taking some time and care. The exhaust collectors require a little manipulation of the exhaust to get everything lined up perfectly, but it's not a hard job and they look great when assembled. The holes for the fuselage machine gun packs were drilled out at this point, and then the instrument console put into place in the cockpit. Control columns were also put in, but the co-pilot seat left out for the time being. The cockpit assembly was then placed into the port fuselage, fitting perfectly. Next up was the metalling of the machine guns using graphite powder. The engines were sprayed with Outlaw gunmetal lacquer. The rear double stinger MG assembly was put together, and glued in place with the transparency. The fuselage could finally now be brought together, which required a little manipulation to ensure everything was in its correct place. Before sealing it all up with extra thin cement, a section at a time. With the wings on, the model could rest before the last 4-hour stretch of the original 24-hour time limit. This last stretch started with construction of the forward nacelle housings of those big double wasp engines. After test fitting of the engines and housings, it was time to add the exhaust covers on the nacelles. And test fit the gun packs. Next, it was the turn of the undercarriage, the various struts and door actuators being added to the main pieces. The engines were then added to their cowlings, various doors and pieces were prepped and sprayed. The 50 cal gun packs I just test fitted were then glued into those holes opened up previously. Two hours from the end and it was time to mask up, using foam to block the large voids in the fuselage for cockpit, bomb bay and so on. And then ICM masking templates were used to cut masks out of washi masking tape. As you might expect, these fitted perfectly. The whole model was then sprayed with rattle can aluminium and the masking all removed. With the last hour upon me, it was a race to complete as much as possible, though it was obvious I wasn't going to make the build in 24 hours. The last MGs were metalled with graphite. The turret was assembled, slotting into place nicely. The props were sprayed using black outlaw paint. And the undercarriage assembled before the time ran out. Allowing myself an extra 2-hour stream, I masked the invasion stripes and sprayed those using ICM acrylics, these being a very dark grey and slightly off-white on this version. Anti-glare panels were masked off and sprayed with outlaw lacquers, and the red panel for the nose art sprayed similarly. With that, the main focus here was in decaling. Pre-application of pledge made for a nice nose art placement. And then we were on to these slightly tricky wing stencils. These were not cut for the invasion stripes, so that all needed to be done by hand. The national insignia and tail markings all proved much less hassle, and I think they always really help in creating a great finishing look to a model. With that, the extra time was over, still leaving the B-26 with a small way to go to be truly complete. Overall, this was a tough ask for such a large and detailed model, and there are definitely areas I would change if I really wanted to try to complete a model in a 24-hour live stream. Firstly, I'd ensure any research was done before the build, as I wasted quite a lot of time doing this on the fly. Secondly, choosing the build options for the build would have helped a lot. If I'd not had the bomb bay open, I'd have saved a bunch of time. But I really didn't want to admit that here, as I think part of showcasing this kit is to really show the detail it has. I did build a load of bombs I didn't need to, which was pure dead time. Despite these factors, it was a fun exercise, and getting the Marauder to the point it's at in 26 hours I feel is still a win. If you'd like to see those finishing pieces come together in a final build video, then let me know in the comments below and I'll see what I can do. That's all for this instalment of Man's Model Moments. If you enjoyed the video, please click the like button, subscribe to the channel for more like it, and share this video with others you think would also enjoy it. You can also follow me on Instagram, Twitter and Facebook, and if you're feeling generous then I also have a Patreon, which is absolutely the best way of helping me to grow the channel and produce more content like this. With that, I hope you have plenty of modelling moments of your own, and I look forward to welcoming you on the next video.